Did you know the whole idea of breakfast being the most important meal of the day is a marketing slogan from the 1940s? It was created by a cereal company. For most of history, people didn't sit down to a big sugary meal first thing in the morning, especially not in the Middle Ages. For them, the day started with work, not with waffles. The morning meal, if it happened at all, was small, practical, and built from whatever was on hand. It was fuel, it was sustenance, and here's the strange part. The simple, humble food they ate might be healthier than almost anything in a modern breakfast aisle. What if the food of a medieval peasant, stuff we'd probably turn our noses up at, holds the key to better health? What if their simple gruel, their dark, heavy bread, and their weak beer were better for our bodies than our fortified cereals and pasteurized orange juice? We live in an age of nutritional science, yet we're sicker than ever. They lived in an age of superstition and hardship, yet their basic diet was free of the things that plague us now: refined sugar, ultra-processed ingredients, and chemical additives. Maybe it's time to look back. Not with a romantic lens, because their lives were incredibly hard, but with a curious one. What did they know that we've forgotten? Could eating like a 14th century farmer actually fix our 21st century health problems? At number 15, could a peasant's gruel fix your gut? Let's start with the most common food in the medieval world. It was called pottage. You could think of it as a stew or a thick soup, but it was more than that. It was the foundation of life. For a peasant, pottage was often the only meal of the day, eaten around noon after a morning of hard labor. It was cooked in a single pot, a cauldron that hung over the central fire in their small, dark homes. It was a perpetual stew. They'd start with a base of water, grains like barley or oats, and whatever vegetables they could grow or find. Onions, leeks, cabbage, peas. They'd add to the pot every day, leftovers, new vegetables, a bit of bacon fat, if they were lucky. The pot was almost never empty. It just kept simmering, the flavors melding and deepening over days. This wasn't glamorous food. The English poet William Langland, writing in his famous 14th century poem Piers Plowman, describes the diet of the poor. He talks of peas pottage and the simple vegetables that sustained them. It was survival food. But from a modern health perspective, pottage looks like a superstar. The core of it was whole grains and vegetables. This means it was incredibly high in fiber. We talk about fiber a lot now, but we barely eat any of it. The average American gets about 15 grams a day. It's recommended we get at least 25 to 30. A medieval peasant likely consumed vastly more than that from a single bowl of pottage. Why does that matter? A 2019 meta-analysis published in The Lancet, which looked at nearly 200 studies, found that people who eat high-fiber diets have a significantly lower risk of heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and colorectal cancer. Fiber isn't just about regularity. It feeds the trillions of bacteria in your gut. This is your microbiome. We are only just beginning to understand how crucial this internal ecosystem is to our overall health, from our immune system to our mental state. The diverse plant-based ingredients in pottage, full of different types of fiber, would have cultivated a rich and robust gut microbiome. Leeks and onions, common pottage ingredients, are particularly high in prebiotic fibers, the specific kind that feeds beneficial gut bacteria. Imagine a modern version. You take a pot, you add some pearl barley, you throw in chopped carrots, celery, leeks, and a handful of lentils. You cover it with water or a simple bone broth. You let it simmer for an hour. Maybe you add some fresh herbs like parsley or thyme at the end. That's it. No sugar, no artificial ingredients, just whole, real food. It's slow-release energy that won't spike your blood sugar. It's packed with vitamins and minerals. It's exactly what your gut bacteria are crying out for. We spend a fortune on probiotic supplements and fancy yogurts trying to fix our digestion. Maybe the answer is simmering in a peasant's cauldron all along. The archaeological evidence backs this up. Your analysis of medieval cooking pots has found residues of grains like barley, oats, and wheat, alongside pollen from brassicas like cabbage and kale. They were eating their greens. Analysis of preserved human waste from medieval latrines, a field known as paleofeces analysis, confirms a diet rich in plant fiber and coarse grains. It's a stark contrast to the highly processed, low-fiber diet that is now the norm in the Western world. They were eating nose to tail and root to leaf out of necessity. We call it a health trend. But here's what we don't know. If pottage was so good for the gut, Did medieval people have fewer instances of modern digestive diseases like irritable bowel syndrome or Crohn's disease despite their terrible sanitation and high rates of infectious diseases? What forgotten vegetables or wild herbs were commonly thrown into the pottage pot, and what unique medicinal or nutritional benefits might they have held? Could the perpetual stew method, where gut-friendly bacteria were constantly being cultivated in the simmering pot, have created a form of living, fermented, probiotic food that we can't easily replicate today? Number 14, was their bread actually better for us? When you think of medieval bread, you probably picture a round, dark, heavy loaf. You're right, the fluffy, white sliced bread we eat today would have been completely alien to them. For most people in the Middle Ages, bread was not made from refined white wheat. That was manket bread, the food of lords and the very wealthy. The vast majority of people ate bread made from rye, barley, oats, or a mix of grains called maslin. This bread was dense, dark, and substantial. It was known as trencher bread because thick, stale slices of it were often used as plates to serve meat or stew on. And after the meal, you could eat your plate. This bread was a world away from modern bread. The key difference was in the flour. They used stone ground, whole grain flour. This means the entire grain kernel, the bran, the germ, and the endosperm was ground up and used. The bran provides fiber. The germ provides B vitamins, healthy fats, and minerals. The endosperm is mostly starch. Modern white flour removes the bran and the germ, leaving only the starchy endosperm. We lose most of the nutrition and, almost all of the fiber. The medieval peasant's loaf was, by its very nature, a high fiber, nutrient dense food. There was another crucial difference: fermentation. They didn't have commercial yeast packets. Bread was leavened using a sourdough starter, a living culture of wild yeast, and beneficial bacteria. This process of long, slow fermentation does something amazing. It starts to break down the gluten and other hard-to-digest components in the grain. Research from the University of Guelph in Canada has shown that traditional sourdough fermentation can lower the glycemic index of bread, meaning it doesn't spike your blood sugar as quickly. It also makes minerals like iron, zinc, and magnesium more bioavailable, meaning your body can absorb them more easily. Some people who have trouble digesting modern bread find they can eat traditionally made sourdough without issue. The bacteria in the starter essentially pre-digest the flour for you. The medieval baker, without any knowledge of microbiology, was creating a healthier, more digestible product through an ancient process. The assize of bread and ale, first enacted in England in 1266, was a law that regulated the price, weight, and quality of bread and beer. It shows how central these products were to society. Like, the law was less concerned with the type of flour than with ensuring the common person wasn't cheated on the weight of their daily loaf. The very existence of this law proves that bread wasn't a side dish. It was a pillar of their diet and economy. So how can you eat like this today? It's about looking for the right kind of bread. Skip the soft, white loaf in the plastic bag. Look for bread from a local baker that is labeled 100% whole rye or whole wheat. Ask if it's made with a sourdough starter. It will be denser, chewier, and have a tangier flavor. It would also be more filling. A single slice of real, dark, sourdough rye bread with a bit of butter or cheese is a far more satisfying and nutritious breakfast than 3 slices of white toast with jam. It provides slow-release energy to get you through the morning, along with a healthy dose of fiber and B vitamins. It's the kind of food your body recognizes, yet we're left with some big questions. We know that ergot, a fungus that can grow on rye, caused outbreaks of madness and hallucinations in the Middle Ages. How did they manage this risk on a daily basis, and what were the long-term, low-level effects of consuming these grains? With their reliance on sourdough, did they have a fundamentally different and more resilient gut flora than us, one that was better adapted to breaking down tough grains? And if white bread was a status symbol of the rich, did the wealthy actually have worse nutrition in some ways than the peasants who were forced to eat the inferior, dark bread? Number 13, could weak beer be a health drink? This one sounds wrong. Beer for breakfast. But we need to understand what beer or ale meant in the Middle Ages. It wasn't the strong, hoppy craft beer we drink today. For most people, the daily drink was what was called small beer or small ale. It was very low in alcohol, probably somewhere between 0.5% and 2.5%, similar to a modern kombucha. More importantly, it was often safer than the water. Water sources were frequently contaminated with bacteria from human and animal waste, leading to diseases like cholera and dysentery. The process of brewing, which involves boiling the water, killed off these dangerous pathogens. And so, drinking small beer was a way to stay hydrated without getting sick. Everyone drank it, men, women, and children. It was a source of hydration and calories, which were desperately needed for a life of physical labor. A farm worker in the 14th century might be allotted a gallon of ale a day as part of their wages. That sounds like a huge amount, but remember the low alcohol content and the intense physical demands of their work. The Domesday Book of 1086, a massive survey of England, records breweries and malt production, showing just how integral ale was to daily life and the economy, even in the early medieval period. From a health perspective, small beer had a few surprising benefits. It was a source of liquid calories, providing energy for work. But it was also a source of nutrients. Traditional brewing with unfiltered whole grains like barley meant the final product contained B vitamins, especially B12, which can be harder to get in a diet low in meat. The yeast used in fermentation is a rich source of these vitamins. A 2000 study in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition suggested that moderate beer consumption could contribute to an increase in B vitamins in the body. The medieval ale was essentially a liquid form of bread. It was often called liquid bread for this very reason. Think about what we drink for breakfast now. Sagari juices, syrupy coffee drinks, sodas. These are loaded with refined sugars and artificial ingredients that cause energy crashes and contribute to chronic disease. A medieval peasant small beer was a simple fermented drink made from grain, water, and yeast. It was hydrating. It provided some energy and nutrition. It didn't contain any refined sugar. Of course, we're not suggesting you start drinking beer for breakfast, but the principle is interesting. They chose a fermented drink that was safer than water and provided some nutritional value. The closest modern equivalent might be something like a low-sugar kombucha or kefir, which are also fermented, low in alcohol, and provide beneficial bacteria. Making a true medieval small beer would be difficult, but you can capture the essence. The idea is a low-sugar, fermented, hydrating drink. Maybe it's a plain water kefir, or a very lightly fermented barley water. The point is to move away from the sugar-laden drinks that dominate our mornings and think about hydration in a more functional, less sweet way. It's a shift in mindset from a sweet treat to a simple, life-sustaining beverage. But this raises some fascinating questions. What was the true nutritional profile of this unfiltered, yeast-rich small beer, and could it have provided a significant portion of their daily vitamin and mineral needs? We know they didn't hop their ale until later in the medieval period. Instead, they used a mix of herbs called grut. What were the medicinal properties of the herbs in this grut, and were they inadvertently consuming a daily herbal tonic? And what were the long-term health effects, even of low-level alcohol consumption, starting from childhood in a population that was already stressed by hard labor and poor nutrition? Year number 12 is hard cheese, the ultimate superfood. Cheese is ancient, but in the Middle Ages, it was a staple food, especially for travelers, soldiers, and laborers. The kind of cheese they ate wasn't the soft, creamy brie or the processed plastic-wrapped slices we have. It was hard, aged, and salty. Think of something like a sharp cheddar, a Parmesan, or a Pecorino. This type of cheese had a huge advantage: it didn't spoil. In an age before refrigeration, this was crucial. A large wheel of hard cheese could be kept for months, providing a reliable source of protein and fat. Monasteries were the great centers of cheesemaking in the Middle Ages. Monks had the land for grazing animals, the organized labor, and the patience to develop imperfect cheesemaking techniques. They kept meticulous records. For example, the records of the Benedictine monks show they were making a hard cheese that is considered the ancestor of Parmesan as early as the 13th century. This wasn't a luxury item. It was a practical way to preserve the nutritional value of milk. This milk goes bad quickly. Cheese locks in the protein, fat, and calcium in a stable, portable form. Let's look at the health benefits. Hard, aged cheese is a fantastic source of protein and fat, two macronutrients that promote satiety. This means they make you feel full and satisfied. A small piece of cheese for breakfast would provide lasting energy, unlike a sugary pastry that leads to a crash an hour later. It's also a powerhouse of calcium, which is essential for bone health. But the real magic might be in the aging process. As cheese ages, it develops certain compounds. A 2017 study published in the journal Food and Function found that aged cheeses are high in a compound called spermidine. The study suggested that higher spermidine intake was linked to lower blood pressure and a reduced risk of cardiovascular disease. Furthermore, many of these cheeses were made with raw milk from grass-fed animals. Raw milk contains a wider array of beneficial bacteria than pasteurized milk. While the aging process kills off harmful pathogens, some of the beneficial bacteria can survive and contribute to a healthy gut. The cheese itself becomes a fermented food. The milk from grass-fed cows is also higher in nutrients like vitamin K2, which works with calcium to build strong bones and may help prevent calcium from depositing in arteries. Cheddar cheese, for example, has its origins in the village of Cheddar in England during the late Middle Ages. The caves in the area provided the perfect cool, constant temperature for aging cheese. A medieval-style breakfast could be as simple as a chunk of good quality, sharp, aged cheese and a slice of dark rye bread. It's fast, it requires no cooking, and it's incredibly nutritious. You get protein, healthy fats, fiber, and slow-release carbs. It's the original grab-and-go breakfast. You just need to choose the right cheese. Look for naturally aged hard cheeses. Read the label. It should just say milk, salt, cultures, and enzymes. Avoid the processed cheese products with long lists of ingredients. This leaves us wondering. We have a fear of full-fat dairy today, but medieval people ate it without a second thought. Were their overall diets and active lifestyles protective against the potential downsides of high-fat foods? What specific strains of bacteria existed in their raw milk cheeses that might be extinct today? And what health benefits have we lost with modern pasteurization and sanitation? Given that cheese was a primary way of preserving milk, how much of their daily caloric and protein intake came from this one single food source? And did this heavy reliance create any unforeseen nutritional deficiencies? Was number 11, were their eggs better than our eggs? For a medieval peasant who was lucky enough to have a few chickens scratching around their yard, eggs were a perfect source of nutrition. Chickens were relatively easy to keep. They could forage for much of their own food, eating insects, worms, seeds, and scraps. They provided not just eggs, but also meat when they were too old to lay. An egg was a neat, self-contained package of high-quality protein and fat. It was a quick and easy meal. A couple boiled or fried eggs could be a simple, sustaining breakfast before a long day in the fields. The key difference between a medieval egg and a modern supermarket egg is the diet and lifestyle of the chicken that laid it. The medieval chicken was a true free-range, pasture-raised animal. Its diet was varied and natural. This has a direct impact on the nutritional quality of the egg. Research from Pennsylvania State University in 2010 showed that eggs from pasture-raised hens compared to eggs from conventionally caged hens had twice the omega-3 fatty acids, 3 times more vitamin E, and 7 times more beta-carotene. They also had higher levels of vitamin A, and vitamin D beta-carotene is what gives the yolks of pasture-raised eggs their deep orange color. It's an antioxidant that our body converts to vitamin A. Omega-3 fatty acids are crucial for brain health and reducing inflammation. The medieval peasant, by eating these eggs, was getting a far more nutrient-dense food than we are when we buy the cheapest eggs from the supermarket. They weren't taking supplements. Their food was the supplement. In the medieval compendium of health, the Tequinum Sanitatis, a beautifully illustrated 14th century handbook, eggs are listed as being good for health, though it advises on the best ways to cook them for different temperaments, according to the medical theories of the day. This shows that people were thinking about the health properties of specific foods. Today, we can replicate this by being careful about the eggs we buy. The labels can be confusing. Cage-free just means the chickens aren't in cages, but they might still be crammed into a barn with no access to the outdoors. Free range is a step up, but the amount of outdoor time can be minimal. The gold standard is pasture-raised. This means the chickens spend their days outdoors on a pasture, eating a natural diet of plants and insects, just like a medieval chicken would have. They cost more, but you are paying for a nutritionally superior food. A simple medieval-inspired breakfast could be 2 pasture-raised eggs fried in a little butter or lard with a sprinkle of salt and herbs. Paired with a piece of whole grain bread, it's a nearly perfect meal. It provides protein, healthy fats, and a host of vitamins and minerals. It's simple, satisfying, and keeps you full for hours. It's real food, produced in a way that is much closer to how it was done for centuries. But there are still things we don't know. Chickens in the Middle Ages were much smaller and laid fewer eggs than modern breeds. What was the exact nutritional composition of these older, less productive breeds of poultry? Did the seasonal variation in the chicken's diet in more insects in summer, more grains in winter, create a seasonal fluctuation in the egg's health benefits that we've lost with our year-round standardized feed? and how prevalent were egg-borne illnesses like salmonella in an era with no refrigeration, and what methods did they use to determine if an egg was still safe to eat. Number 10. Why was eating leftovers a good idea? The concept of a specific breakfast food is a modern invention. For most of history, the morning meal, if eaten, was simply leftovers from the previous night's supper. This was a matter of pure practicality and frugality. Nobody wasted food. If there was pottage left in the pot, that's what you ate. If there was a piece of bread and some cheese, that was breakfast. This approach is completely at odds with our modern way of thinking, where we have a whole category of foods, cereals, pastries, pancakes that are deemed for breakfast only. There's a quiet genius to eating leftovers for breakfast. It completely removes the sugar trap. Most modern breakfast foods are high in sugar and refined carbohydrates. Cereal, muffins, sweetened yogurt, toast with jam, it's basically dessert for breakfast. This leads to a rapid spike in blood sugar, followed by a crash a couple hours later, leaving you hungry, tired, and craving more sugar. It's a vicious cycle. Eating leftovers from a healthy dinner bypasses this entirely. A meal of leftover roasted chicken and vegetables, or a bowl of lentil soup, provides protein, fat, and complex carbohydrates. These nutrients are digested slowly, providing a steady supply of energy throughout the morning. This wasn't just a peasant practice. Even in wealthier households, food was repurposed. The 14th century French cookbook, Le Viandier of Taillevent, one of the earliest and most influential medieval cookbooks, contains recipes that are complex and rich, but the underlying principle of using everything was still present. Bones were boiled for, broth, stale bread was used to thicken sauces, nothing was thrown away. This mindset extended to all meals, including the first one of the day. From a health perspective, starting your day with a savory, protein-rich meal can have huge benefits. A 2014 study from the University of Missouri found that eating a high-protein breakfast led to greater feelings of fullness, reduced evening snacking on unhealthy foods, and better control of appetite throughout the day compared to a lower-protein breakfast. By eating last night's stew, the medieval worker was setting themselves up for a day of stable energy and reduced cravings without even thinking about it. It was just the sensible thing to do. You can adopt this strategy easily. Don't think about breakfast food. Just think about food. When we're making dinner, make a little extra. That way breakfast is already prepared for the next morning. It saves time, reduces food waste, and is almost certainly a healthier option than anything you'll find in a box. It's a radical shift in perspective. Breakfast doesn't have to be sweet. It doesn't have to be a carbohydrate bomb. It can just be a smaller version of a normal, healthy meal. But this practice raises some interesting questions. Without refrigeration, how did they safely store leftovers overnight? Were they more resilient to foodborne bacteria, or did they just accept a certain level of risk? Did the practice of constantly reheating food, like the perpetual pottage stew, alter the nutritional content of the food in ways we don't understand, perhaps destroying some vitamins, but making others more bioavailable? And did the complete absence of a sweet breakfast culture fundamentally change their palate and their relationship with sugar for their entire lives? Number 9. What can we learn from a simple oatcake? Before the widespread cultivation of wheat, and in colder, wetter climates where wheat didn't grow well, grains like oats and barley were the staples. This was especially true in places like Scotland, Wales, and northern England. One of the simplest and most ancient ways to prepare these grains was to make a flatbread or a cake. An oat cake, in its most basic form, is just oats, water, and a little salt mixed together and cooked on a hot flat stone or griddle. It's a dense, unleavened, cracker-like bread. It was portable, durable, and packed with energy. A traveler or a shepherd could carry a few oatcakes with them for a simple meal on the go. The Roman soldiers who occupied Britain noted the locals' consumption of oats. The writer Samuel Johnson famously and snobbishly defined oats in his 1755 dictionary as a grain, which in England is generally given to horses, but in Scotland supports the people. The Scots knew what they were doing. Oats are a nutritional powerhouse. They are particularly high in a type of soluble fiber called beta-glucan. Numerous studies have shown that beta-glucan is incredibly good for you. A 2014 meta-analysis in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition confirmed that oat beta-glucan can significantly lower LDL cholesterol, the bad kind. It also helps to control blood sugar levels by slowing down the absorption of carbohydrates, making it a great food for preventing type 2 diabetes. Beta-glucan also has a powerful effect on satiety. It forms a gel-like substance in your gut, which slows down digestion and makes you feel full for a very long time. An oat cake for breakfast, perhaps with a piece of cheese or a smear of honey, would provide long-lasting, slow-release energy. This is a stark contrast to a sugary breakfast that leaves you hungry again in an hour. The medieval person eating oatcakes was fueling their body for a day of hard labor in the most efficient way possible. Making the traditional oatcake is simple. You mix rolled oats with a little whole grain flour, oat, or wheat, a pinch of salt, and just enough hot water to form a stiff dough. You roll it out very thin and cook it in a dry frying pan for a few minutes on each side until it's crisp. That's it. There's no sugar, no yeast, no oil. It's one of the purest, most basic forms of sustenance you can make. Barley cakes, made in a similar way, were also common and offer similar benefits. Barley also contains beta-glucans and is excellent for heart health and blood sugar control. We often think of oats as just porridge, but these simple rustic cakes are another way to enjoy their benefits. But this simple food leaves us with questions. Oat cakes were often cooked on a bakestone, a piece of slate or stone heated over a fire. Did this slow, direct heat cooking method preserve nutrients better than modern baking? The oats they used were minimally processed, likely just coarsely ground or rolled. How did the nutritional profile of these ancient heirloom varieties of oats and barley compare to the highly hybridized versions we grow today? And in a diet so heavily reliant on a single grain, do they suffer from specific mineral deficiencies because of the phytic acid in the oats, which can bind to minerals and prevent their absorption? Number 8 was their tea just weeds from the garden. Coffee and black tea were unknown in medieval Europe. Coffee arrived from the Arab world in the 17th century and tea from Asia around the same time. So what did people drink in the morning if they wanted something hot? Often it was a simple herbal infusion. This was essentially a tea made from whatever herbs or plants were growing in their garden or in the wild. It was a way to make water more palatable and, in many cases, a form of folk medicine. They would have used a wide variety of plants: mint, chamomile, lemon balm, nettle, dandelion, raspberry leaf, thyme, rosemary. The choice would depend on the season, the location, and what the person believed they needed. Hildegard of Bingen, a remarkable 12th century German abbess, writer, and mystic, wrote extensively about the medicinal properties of plants and herbs in her work Physica. She recommended fennel for digestion, for example, and rose for headaches. This knowledge wasn't just confined to monasteries, it was common folk, wisdom passed down through generations. A woman running a household would know which herbs to use to soothe a cough or settle a stomach. From a modern health standpoint, these herbal infusions are fantastic. They are hydrating and contain 0 calories or sugar. But more than that, many of these common herbs are packed with antioxidants and beneficial compounds. Nettle tea, for example, is full of vitamins and minerals, including iron and calcium, and has been studied for its anti-inflammatory properties. A 2018 study in the journal Molecules detailed the wide range of pharmacological effects of nettles. Peppermint tea is well known for its ability to soothe digestive upset. Chamomile is famous for its calming effects and can promote relaxation. Starting the day with a warm mug of herbal tea is a gentle way to wake up your system. Unlike coffee, which can be harsh on an empty stomach and lead to jitters, a simple herbal infusion is calming and nourishing. It's a practice we can easily revive. Instead of reaching for a sugary juice or an overly caffeinated drink, you can steep some fresh mint leaves or a dried chamomile flower in hot water. It's a way of connecting with a simpler, more natural way of living. You can grow a pot of mint on your windowsill. It's almost effortless. This practice of using local plants for infusions connects to the idea of terroir, the way the local environment shapes the flavor of food and drink, which we usually associate with wine. The specific blend of minerals in the local soil and water would have been reflected in the plants, and thus in the tea. A person's morning drink was, in a very real sense, a taste of the land they lived on. But this world of herbal medicine is also full of unknowns. What were the most common breakfast teas for the average person, the undocumented recipes that were never written down by scholars like Hildegard? We know some herbs can be toxic in large doses. How did they manage the dosage and avoid accidental poisoning with this system of folk medicine? And with the massive loss of biodiversity and traditional knowledge, how many beneficial plants that they used regularly have we completely forgotten about, their potential health benefits lost to time? Number 7, could foraged fruit be the original breakfast bar? In a world without supermarkets, people had to be opportunistic. The seasons dictated what was available to eat. In the summer and autumn, one of the most readily available sources of food was foraged fruit and berries. Blackberries, raspberries, wild strawberries, bilberries, similar to blueberries, elderberries, crab apples. These would have been a welcome addition to a monotonous diet, providing a burst of sweetness and flavor. For a child sent out to watch the sheep or for a worker on their way to the fields, a handful of fresh berries could have been a simple, quick breakfast. This wasn't just a casual snack, it was a crucial source of vitamins, especially vitamin C. Scurvy, the disease caused by vitamin C deficiency, was a real threat, particularly in the winter months when fresh produce was scarce. Taking full advantage of the berry season was a matter of survival. They would have eaten them fresh, but also preserved them. The 14th century book on household management, Le Ménager de Paris, includes recipes for preserving fruits and making jams and jellies, showing that even in more organized households, these seasonal windfalls were highly valued. From a health perspective, these wild berries are nutritional superstars. They are low in calories, but packed with vitamins, minerals, and fiber. More importantly, they are incredibly rich in antioxidants, particularly the dark-colored berries like blackberries and bilberries. These compounds, called anthocyanins, are what give them their deep red, blue, and purple hues. Research, such as a 2010 study in the Nutrition Reviews journal, has linked the consumption of these berry anthocyanins to improved brain function, better heart health, and a reduced risk of certain types of cancer. They help protect our cells from damage caused by free radicals. The medieval person eating a handful of wild berries was consuming a potent dose of natural medicine. The sugar in these fruits is balanced by the high fiber content, which prevents a sharp spike in blood sugar. It's the original low glycemic sweet treat. It's also worth noting that wild versions of fruits are often more nutrient dense than their cultivated cousins. A wild blackberry is often smaller and tartar than a big, plump, commercial one, but it can have a higher concentration of nutrients and antioxidants. It hasn't been bred for sweetness and size at the expense of nutrition. We can bring this into our modern breakfast. While most of us can't go foraging for our food, we can choose to add a handful of berries to our morning meal. Add them to porridge, yogurt, or just eat them on their own. Choose darker berries for the highest antioxidant content. Opt for frozen berries when they're not in season. They are frozen at peak ripeness and retain most of their nutritional value. It's a simple way to add a huge nutritional punch to your day. But there are still mysteries here. How extensive was the knowledge of wild edible plants among the general population? Did they eat a much wider variety of fruits and berries than we currently know about from the historical record? We know some berries are poisonous. How was the knowledge of which ones were safe passed down through generations, and how often did people make fatal mistakes? And could the intense seasonal consumption of these antioxidant-rich foods have provided a protective effect that helped them endure the nutritional scarcity of the long winter months? Number 6, was smoked fish a brain food for Vikings? In coastal and northern regions of Europe, from Scandinavia to Britain, fish was a central part of the diet. And a primary way of making it last was through smoking, salting, and drying. Herring and cod were particularly important. These preserved fish were an excellent source of protein and fat that could be stored for months, making them vital for surviving the winter and for provisioning long sea voyages, which is why they were a staple for the Vikings. For a fisherman or a coastal dweller, a piece of smoked herring, known as a kipper, with some bread could be a common breakfast. It sounds like a strong flavor to start the day with, but it makes a lot of nutritional sense. Oily fish like herring, mackerel, and salmon are the best dietary source of omega-3 fatty acids, specifically EPA and DHA. These fats are absolutely essential for brain health. Numerous studies have shown that DHA is a major structural component of the brain and retina, and that a diet rich in omega-3s can help protect against cognitive decline, dementia, and depression. A 2015 study in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease found that omega-3 supplementation improved cognitive function in people with mild cognitive impairment. The Vikings, sailing their longships across the stormy North Atlantic, were fueling their brains with the perfect food. These fish are also one of the few natural food sources of vitamin D known as the sunshine vitamin. Our bodies can make it from sunlight, but in the long, dark winters of Northern Europe, that's not possible. Vitamin D deficiency would have been a major problem. This vitamin is crucial for bone health and immune function. Eating oily fish regularly would have been one of the only ways to get enough of it. So that breakfast of smoked herring was providing essential brain fats and the vitamin D needed to fight off illness and maintain strong bones. On archaeological digs at Viking and medieval settlements in places like York, Dublin, and along the Baltic coast consistently turn up massive quantities of fish bones, confirming their dietary importance. Today, we are often told to eat more oily fish, but most people don't. A medieval-inspired breakfast could be a small piece of smoked salmon or smoked mackerel on a slice of rye bread. It's a savory, high-protein meal that will keep you full and focused. It provides a direct hit of those crucial omega-3s and vitamin D. It's a powerful alternative to a typical sweet or starchy breakfast. You just need to look for fish that has been naturally smoked without added sugars or artificial flavors. But this raises some questions, like the smoking process can create potentially carcinogenic compounds called polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons PAHs. Did the heavy consumption of smoked foods lead to higher rates of stomach and esophageal cancers in these populations? How did they balance the preservation benefits with the potential health risks? The fish they were eating were wild, but today much of our oily fish is farmed. What is the true nutritional difference in terms of omega-3s and potential contaminants like PCBs between the wild fish of the medieval seas and the farmed fish we eat today? Did their diet, so rich in marine oils, give them a cognitive or visual advantage that we can scientifically measure. And number 5, could a little bit of bacon be good for you? For the common person in the Middle Ages, meat was a rarity, but one form of meat that was more accessible was pork. A family might be able to raise a single pig, letting it forage in the woods for acorns and roots. When the pig was slaughtered in the autumn, not a single part of it would be wasted. The meat would be preserved primarily through salting and smoking to last through the winter. This is where we get bacon and salt pork. For a laborer facing a day of intense physical work, a small piece of this preserved pork, fried up for breakfast, provided a much-needed blast of calories and fat. This is not the thin, watery bacon we often see in supermarkets today. This was thick-cut, heavily salted, and often smoked for days. It was a concentrate of energy. The fat was particularly important. In a world where calories were scarce, fat was a precious nutrient. It provided more than twice the energy per gram as carbohydrates or protein. That fat would be rendered out and used for cooking, a practice we see reflected in the name of the larder, the cool room where lard and other foods were stored. The form of curry, a recipe collection from the court of King Richard II in the late 14th century, shows the use of lard in many dishes, indicating its importance even in wealthy kitchens. From a health perspective, this seems problematic. We've been told for decades to avoid saturated fat. However, our understanding of fat is becoming more nuanced. The fat from a pig raised on a natural, forage diet is different from the fat of a factory-farmed animal. Pigs that eat things like acorns are eating a diet higher in monounsaturated fats, the same kind of healthy fat found in olive oil. The fat from pasture-raised pigs also contains higher levels of fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin D if the animals are exposed to sunlight. A small amount of high-quality bacon from a pasture-raised pig can be part of a healthy breakfast. It provides protein and fat for satiety. It provides a rich, savory flavor that can make a simple meal of eggs feel more complete. The key is quality and quantity. The medieval peasant wasn't eating a half-pound of bacon every morning. It was a small, precious piece to add flavor and energy. It was a condiment, not the main event. If you choose to eat bacon, look for brands that come from pasture-raised pigs and are cured without nitrates and nitrites, using just salt and natural flavorings like celery powder. But the role of pork in their diet is complex. Pigs were often seen as unclean animals, and their meat was sometimes viewed with suspicion by religious authorities, yet they were a cornerstone of the peasant economy. How did this cultural ambivalence affect consumption patterns? The process of heavily salting meat was essential for preservation, but what were the health consequences of such a high-sodium diet, especially in terms of blood pressure and kidney health? And could the fat from these foraged-fed pigs have had a unique fatty acid profile with different health implications than any pork we can buy today, even from the best pasture-raised sources? Number 4, were stewed fruits their version of jam? Sugar, as we know it, refined from sugarcane, was an incredibly expensive luxury in the Middle Ages, imported from the East and used more like a spice by the very wealthy. For the average person, the main sources of sweetness were honey and fruit. One way to preserve fruit and enjoy its sweetness out of season was to cook it down. with stewed apples or pears, slowly cooked with a little water and perhaps some spices like cinnamon or cloves if you could afford them, would have been a simple warming breakfast, especially in the colder months. This was a way of making hard, less than perfect fruit palatable. Windfall apples or pears that were too bruised or sour to eat raw could be transformed into a soft, digestible, and comforting meal. The process of slow cooking breaks down the cellulose in the fruit, making the nutrients easier for the body to absorb. It also concentrates the natural sweetness. This dish could be eaten on its own, or perhaps with a piece of bread or a dollop of thick cream or cheese. Medieval cookbooks and household accounts often mention Warden pears, a type of hard cooking pear that was ideal for this kind of preparation, often being baked or stewed for long periods. From a health perspective, stewed fruit is a wonderful breakfast. It's a gentle, warm food that's easy on the digestive system. The key is that it contains no added refined sugar. All the sweetness comes from the fruit itself. Apples and pears are also a great source of soluble fiber, particularly pectin. Pectin is another one of those super fibers like the beta-glucan in oats. It feeds beneficial gut bacteria and has been shown to help lower cholesterol. Cooking the fruit makes the pectin more readily available. A 2011 study in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry showed that the antioxidant capacity of some fruits can actually be increased by cooking depending on the method. The gentle simmering of stewing is less destructive to nutrients than high heat methods like frying. Adding spices like cinnamon is another health bonus. Cinnamon is well known for its ability to help regulate blood sugar, making it a perfect partner for the natural sugars in the fruit. This is an incredibly easy breakfast to make. Just chop up a couple of apples or pears, put them in a pot with a splash of water and a sprinkle of cinnamon, and let them simmer on low heat until they are soft. You can make a big batch and keep it in the fridge for a few days. It's a simple, whole food breakfast that feels like a treat but is actually very good for you. It's a world away from a sugary commercial jam, which is often more sugar than fruit. But this simple dish holds some secrets. What other fruits were commonly stewed in this way? Quince, medlars, and other forgotten fruits were more common then. What unique nutritional benefits did these fruits offer? The spices they used when they could get them were seen as having medicinal properties according to the humoral theory of medicine. Were they inadvertently using combinations like pears and cloves that had real synergistic health benefits we are only now rediscovering? And did this practice of consuming cooked, easily digestible fruit provide important nutrients to people with poor dental health, which was rampant in the Middle Ages, who might have been unable to eat hard, raw foods? Number 3, why was a simple porridge so powerful? Pottage was the all-purpose stew, but a simpler version made just from grains and water or milk was also a staple. This is porridge. In English, it was often called gruel. It could be made from oats, barley, wheat, or rye, whatever grain was available. It was cooked slowly until the grains broke down into a thick, comforting mush. This was the ultimate peasant food. It was cheap, filling, and easy to make. It could be made savory with a pinch of salt or slightly sweet with a drizzle of honey or some seasonal berries if you were lucky. The nutritional power of porridge comes from the whole grains it's made from. As we've seen with oatcakes, these grains are packed with slow-release carbohydrates and soluble fiber. Starting the day with a warm bowl of porridge provides a steady stream of energy, preventing the mid-morning slump that comes from a high-sugar breakfast. It's a meal that sticks with you. The Roman army was famously fueled by porridge, a testament to its ability to sustain physical endurance. In medieval times, it was the fuel for a different kind of army, the army of laborers who built the castles and cathedrals and farmed the land. The health benefits are well documented. We already discussed the cholesterol lowering and blood sugar stabilizing effects of the beta-glucan in oats and barley. But porridge has another benefit, hydration. Because it's cooked with a large amount of liquid, it helps you start your day hydrated. It's also incredibly easy to digest, making it a good food for children, the elderly, or anyone who is feeling unwell. It's the original comfort food, and for good reason. Its gentle, warming nature is soothing to the body. Its archaeological evidence from the Neolithic period onwards shows that humans have been making some form of grain-based porridge for thousands of years. It is one of our oldest and most enduring foods. In the Middle Ages, it was a cornerstone of the diet. The choice of grain would vary by region. Oats in the north, wheat or barley further south. Sometimes they would make frumenty, a type of porridge made from cracked wheat, often enriched with milk, eggs, or even meat broth in wealthier households as described in medieval recipes. A modern bowl of porridge is very close to its medieval ancestor. The key is to use whole grains. Choose steel-cut oats or whole-rolled oats over the instant pre-sweetened packets. Or try making it with pearl barley for a chewier texture, cook it with water or milk, and avoid adding sugar. Instead, top it with some fresh berries, a sprinkle of nuts or seeds, or a dash of cinnamon. It's a humble breakfast, but its health benefits are immense. It's a direct link to a way of eating that has sustained humanity for millennia. But even this simple food raises questions. They often cooked porridge for a very long time, sometimes for hours over a low heat. Did this extended cooking process have any unique effects on the starches and fibers in the grain, perhaps making them even more digestible or beneficial for the gut? They used a tool called a spurtle to stir porridge designed to prevent lumps. Is there any science behind this, or was it just tradition? And what was the nutritional difference between porridge made with water, the peasant's way, versus porridge made with whole, raw milk, a more luxurious version? Could that single difference have had a major impact on a child's growth and development? Number 2, were beans for breakfast a secret to longevity? We don't often think of beans and peas for breakfast, but in the Middle Ages, they were a crucial source of protein, especially during Lent, the 40-day period before Easter when eating meat was forbidden. The legumes, including fava beans, peas, and lentils, were a staple of the peasant diet. They were easy to grow, and when dried, could be stored for the entire year. They were often referred to as the poor man's meat. They would be added to pottage, made into their own separate dish called peas pottage, essentially a thick pea soup or porridge, or served alongside bread. The nutritional benefits of legumes are extraordinary. They are one of the best plant-based sources of protein, which is essential for building and repairing tissues in the body. They are also incredibly high in fiber, both soluble and insoluble. This combination of protein and fiber makes them extremely satiating. A breakfast that includes beans will keep you feeling full and satisfied for a very long time. This is why a traditional English breakfast with its baked beans is so filling, though its medieval origins are more humble. The legumes are also a fantastic source of minerals like iron, magnesium, and potassium, as well as B vitamins. They are a low glycemic food, meaning they have a very gentle effect on blood sugar levels. A 2012 study published in the Archives of Internal Medicine found that a diet rich in legumes was effective at improving glycemic control and reducing the risk of heart disease in people with type 2 diabetes. The medieval peasant, by relying on beans and peas, was unwittingly eating a diet that is now being recommended by doctors to prevent and manage chronic disease. The importance of these crops is reflected in the medieval agricultural system. They were often planted as part of the 3-field crop rotation system. One field would have wheat or rye, one would have oats or barley, and the third would be planted with legumes or left fallow. The legumes had the added benefit of fixing nitrogen in the soil, which improved its fertility for the next year's grain crop. They weren't just feeding the people, they were feeding the land. Bringing this idea into a modern breakfast might seem strange, but it's not difficult. You could have a scoop of leftover lentil stew, you could mash some cannellini beans with a little olive oil and herbs and spread it on whole grain toast. Or you could make a simple dish of fava beans sautéed with a little garlic. It's about breaking the mental barrier that says beans are only for lunch or dinner. They are a savory, nutrient-dense, and sustainable way to start the day. But there are lingering puzzles. Your fava beans, which are very common, can cause a dangerous condition called favism in people with a specific genetic deficiency. How did medieval populations, without any knowledge of genetics, navigate this risk? We know they ate peas pottage, but what other simple, everyday recipes did they have for preparing legumes that have been lost to history? And given their importance as a protein source, particularly during the long period of Lent, did this forced shift to a plant-based diet for over a month each year have a cleansing or protective effect on their health that we could learn from? Number 1 was a byproduct of cheese making their protein shake. This might be the most unusual idea of all. When you make cheese, you separate milk into 2 parts, the solid curds, which are pressed to become cheese, and the liquid leftover, which is called whey. In our modern world, we've turned whey into a highly processed protein powder that bodybuilders drink. But in the Middle Ages, whey was a simple, everyday food source. It was a byproduct of the farmhouse economy, and it was never wasted. It would have been consumed as a drink, especially by the poor who couldn't afford to drink the whole milk, which was being turned into valuable cheese or butter. Whey might look like thin, watery stuff, but it's surprisingly nutritious. It contains a small amount of very high-quality protein. Whey protein is considered a complete protein because it contains all 9 essential amino acids that our bodies can't make on their own. It is also very easily and quickly digested. This is why it's so popular with athletes for muscle recovery. For a medieval person, a drink of whey would have provided a quick and easily absorbable source of protein and hydration. It was the original protein shake in its most natural and unprocessed form. But the benefits don't stop there. Whey is also a source of minerals like calcium, potassium, and phosphorus. It contains lactose, the natural sugar in milk, which provides some energy. And importantly, the acid whey, produced from making cheeses like cottage cheese or Greek yogurt, is full of beneficial bacteria, making it a probiotic drink that could help support a healthy gut. The 16th century writer Thomas Cogan, in his book The Haven of Health, recommended drinking whey in the spring as a cleansing tonic. This shows that people recognized its health-giving properties long before we understood the science of proteins and probiotics. Today, real liquid whey is hard to find unless you make your own cheese or yogurt. But the principle can be applied. Choosing a plain, unsweetened yogurt or kefir for breakfast is a way to get a similar benefit. These are fermented dairy products that provide high-quality protein and a dose of beneficial probiotics. Plain Greek yogurt, which is strained to remove some of the whey, is particularly high in protein. It's a much healthier choice than the sweetened fruit-on-the-bottom yogurts that are loaded with sugar. The idea is to consume a simple fermented dairy product in its least processed form. The medieval consumption of this humble byproduct highlights their resourcefulness in our modern wastefulness. They found a use for everything, and in doing so, they stumbled upon a food that we now spend a fortune to recreate in a factory. And this leaves us with the final, most shocking questions. The whey they drank was raw, unpasteurized, and teeming with a complex ecosystem of bacteria from the local environment. What unique probiotic benefits did this wild fermented whey offer that are completely absent from our modern sterile food supply? Whey composition changes depending on the animal's diet and the season. Did they unknowingly benefit from these subtle seasonal shifts in its nutritional profile? And if such a simple waste product was so nutritious, what other byproducts of our modern food system are we currently throwing away that could be hidden sources of incredible health benefits, if only we had the wisdom of a medieval peasant?